So this is the third video on this video series about different speaker roles in AP or WSDC debates. And if you haven't watched the video on the first speaker or on the second speaker, but this video is on the third speaker, or as other people call him, the whip speaker. So the whip speaker is the last constructive speaker of a WSDC or Asian Parliamentary debate. So in this video, I'm going to go over three main things: the structure of a whip speech, the importance of a whip speech, and on different tips on how to make your whip speech better. Usually in the whip speech, you do not have any new constructive material, so you do not have any new arguments. The role of the whip speaker then is to organize the debate that has happened so far from the first speakers and the second speakers, and to explain how the debate went and to compare both sides on the debate. They do this comparison by using something called clashes, and clashes are a structure that compares the argumentation and refutation from both sides to explain why one team wins on that topic. Firstly, let's go over the structure of a whip speech, because a whip speech mostly revolves around these things called clashes. They will be the majority of the time inside your speech. But how does a whip speech start, and what is the last thing that you do on a whip speech? So it starts with an introduction, as I believe all speeches should, and then you move into refutations. But before you do your refutations, you can do a strategic call out, which is to say why the other team has made a strategic mistake and point it out and explain why that mistake is so big or why that mistake is going to lose the debate for the other team. Next, you'll go into refutations. And some whip speakers will put their refutations as part of their clashes, but other whip speakers will have some refutations that are not inside the clashes, but that happen before the clashes, and so they'll have a separate section. So, introduction, strategic call-out, refutation. And then right after refutations, you will have your clashes, which are the bulk of a whip speaker's speech. Usually, I would recommend having 2 clashes in your speech, but in an 8-minute speech, you can go all the way up to 3 clashes. But I would usually never recommend 1 clash in a debate. If there was only 1 clash in the debate, then that probably was quite a low quality debate, and having 1 clash doesn't really organize the debate very well. So again, what's the structure so far? It is introduction, strategic call out, revocation, and then clashes. So either 1 clash or 2 clashes or 3 clashes, but I greatly recommend that you have 2. You can have 3 if you have an 8-minute speech, or there isn't longer, but yes, an 8-minute speech. So what is the structure of a clash? Because a clash in and of itself is a bit of time. There's a large chunk within a clash itself. So what do you do within a clash? Depending on the format that you're debating, sometimes there are 4-minute speeches for whip speakers, and sometimes there are 8-minute speeches. It changes the format a little bit, but let's just go with an 8-minute speech. A clash would start with the title of the clash. So you need to tell the judge and the other team what that clash is about. Very often, people will phrase clashes in questions. So they will say, does this policy create more benefits than harms? So that would be the title of a clash. Or is this policy justified? Right? That would be the title of a clash. That title allows the judge and everyone in the debate to understand what you're about to talk about and what you're about to compare. Mind that the title of a clash shouldn't be biased. It shouldn't be a question where it's unfairly stated. It should just be a question that gives everybody a sense of what you're going to talk about. For example, you never title the clash as being, why is this policy not justified? Right? That phrasing of why is it not justified pre-assumes that the policy is not justified, and therefore it's biased. But the question, is this motion justified or is this policy justified, is a lot more fair. And one team will answer yes, and one team will answer no to that clash. So after you have the title of the clash, then you usually will talk about the other team's material on that clash. What they said, their ideas, their arguments, their refutations that relates to that clash. So if the title of the clash is this policy justified, then you would talk about the other team's arguments and ideas about whether the policy is ethical or what has to do with morality. Then you would rebut their material, or you would restate some of the refutations that your earlier speakers had said against that material. So you might say something like, however, their arguments are wrong, or their arguments are untrue because of blah. Or you might say, as my second speaker has already said, blah, 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 right? So again, either you're making new refutations, or you are restating and rebuilding the reputations that your earlier speakers have already given. Then, after you've done that, you will move on to talking about and reintroducing the ideas that were given by your side. For example, if we were to talk about the justification clash, what did your team say about the morality and the ethics of that policy? And why did you believe that it is a just policy, or it is a policy that is creating more equality or being morally correct? So you restate those ideas. You would restate them fully. You would just give the judge a sense of what was said. And then you can do one of either two things. You could say that the other team tried to refute your idea and bring up their refutations again, but then explain why those refutations are invalid. Or you might be able to say that they didn't refute your idea, that idea was not engaged with, and that idea still stands on your side because they did not attack that idea. So again, either one of these strategies has to relate to the debate and how the debate actually went. So if they did attack you with refutations, then you would respond to those refutations as to why those refutations are wrong and why your argument still stands. And then lastly, you want to explain the fact that you win this clash, and you want to explain why winning this clash is so beneficial for your side. Does winning this clash mean that you win the debate? And why would it mean that you win the debate? For example, if we were talking about the earlier clash that I used as an example, is this policy justified? Why is the fact that you were able to prove that this policy is justified, why does that mean that you should win the debate? And why is this clash important? And so that would be the last part of that clash. So this is a clash structure. It is the title first, the arguments and ideas given by the other side, why those ideas are wrong, the ideas given by your side and why those ideas are correct, or why those ideas still stand, and then the fact that you win this clash and why winning this clash is so important for your side for winning the debate. And then that is the full structure of a clash. Mind, you have to do this structure twice. So you would have clash number 1 and then you have clash number 2. Okay, so what is the structure so far of a wit speech? It is introduction, strategic callout, refutation, clash 1, clash 2. Next, we move on to something called weighing. Weighing no longer is about proving whether ideas are true or whether ideas are not true. Weighing is about comparing the impacts that are given by both sides. So what you would be doing here is that you would assume that some of the ideas or arguments of the other side might be correct, or that they might be correct in the mind of the judge. So you would be charitable to the interpretation of their arguments. If you are being charitable to their arguments and believe that some of their impacts might stand, why is it that your impacts, the impacts from your team's arguments, why are those more important, or why are those better than the impacts of the other team, right? So you're just comparing the impacts of both sides and saying why your impacts are better than theirs. When it comes to weighing, you can choose to lower the impacts of the other team, and you can choose to increase the impacts of your team. You can explain why both of those things are true. But when it comes to weighing, you have to understand the metrics with which you're weighing. So you might be talking about how intense the impacts are, or how much of a scope those impacts have in terms of how many people are affected. Or you can talk about the ethics of the impacts, whether those impacts are ethical. Or you can talk about whether these impacts are something that are long-term. There are other weighing metrics, and honestly, explaining all of those things would take a very long video. But that's sort of the gist of weighing. I don't think I can explain all of the ins and outs of how to do weighing in this video, because again, I would highly recommend you watch a different video for that. I think I have a video on weighing as well, which I think I should make more for, because weighing is quite difficult. So after you do your weighing, then you can explain, maybe you can explain why you win the debate, or you could just conclude, right? You could do the weighing and then have your conclusion. So this is the overall structure of a wit speech. It is introduction, strategic call-out, refutation, clash 1, clash 2, weighing, conclusion. by the way, this structure is not always the same. You might have more than 2 clashes. You might have less than 2 clashes. You might integrate your rebuttals into your clashes, right? So you might not have your rebuttals as a separate section, or you might not have a strategic call-out, right? And so those things can be different from speech to speech. But that's the overview of what a structure for a whip speech should look like and the different elements that should be in the whip speech. And I think almost always you want to have weighing at the end of your third speaker speech. It would be a bit of a weird debate if you didn't do any weighing. And almost always you want to have two clashes. And the structure of that clash can change as well. The structure that I just instructed you on is a good structure, but some people like to be a little bit more, I would say, free-flowing with the way that they structure their clashes. By no means is the structure that I just gave you the only way to structure a third speaker speech, but I would recommend starting with this structure. And even if you stuck to this structure forever, there would be no issues with that. Okay, why is a whip speech important? Because a whip speaker is basically able to really break the motion down, break the debate down, and explains to the judge the nitty-gritty of what went on, and not only bring down the arguments of the other side, but greatly increase the impacts of their team. And you can add some extra mechanisms and you can add extra impacts as the whip speaker, but you cannot and you should not rely on adding new material such as a new constructive argument. Even in adding new mechanisms, I would probably stray a little bit away from that and just focus a little bit more on trying to summarize or reinterpret or expand a lot of what your first speaker and second speaker has said. Does that mean that a whip speech should just be a repetition of what went on in the debate? No, definitely not. Because the whip speaker is still a constructive speaker, and so they can continue to add more refutations that haven't been given before. Or the whip speaker can expand impacts beyond what the impacts were in the second speech. And the whip speaker can even sneak in a few mechanisms as to why their argument is still true, and those things are not really treated as new material. Just a wholly new argument or a wholly new angle of looking at the debate is definitely seen as new material and will not be credited, and people will not care about it as much in the third speech, because in the whip speech the debate's almost done, and so anything new feels like it is maybe unfair for the other team because they don't have time to respond to the new material. And this is why new material in the third speech is usually penalized and not counted. Here are some important tips that I have for the third speaker. So one really important tip is that the third speaker should not prepare the majority of their speech during prep time. I would highly recommend that third speakers think about how to help the first speaker and maybe write an argument for them. If you're in a in-person tournament, right, maybe your first speaker can write the first substantive argument and you can write the second one, right? You can help them with their setup. Or you can preemptively understand what kind of refutations you want to make, but do not organize clashes during preparation time. I would say you really want to be quite flexible as a whip speaker and see the debate as it is, not as you think it should be. Second of all, whip speakers often have a bad habit of mostly clashing and mostly talking about what the first speaker said. But what the first speaker said in the debate is less relevant than what the second speaker said. So if the debate evolved from the first speaker to the second speaker, then you need to contend with, or you need to refute against, or you need to explain against what the second speaker said in the debate. And also try not to sort of clash or contradict with what your first speaker or what your second speaker did, because you cannot introduce more constructive material. You are sort of bound to what your team already said, and then you need to sort of expand on those ideas instead of trying to find a different angle. Lastly, for whip speakers, I would highly recommend that you use paper to prepare your whip speech and that you don't use the computer. Because on paper, it's a lot easier for you to be able to organize the debate as to how the debate happened chronologically. So what I would recommend, if you can, is have a really large piece of paper and divide that piece of paper in half and divide it by the multiple speeches that were having the debate. So I would probably have 6 sections on that piece of paper. So I know what the PM said, what the LO said, the DPM said, the DLO said, and what the whip speakers said. So say you were the opposition whip, you can also write down what the government whip said. So you can track the debate as it went chronologically. This is something that is difficult to do when you're on the computer. Of course, you could make sort of a boxes and a spreadsheet to organize it that way, but it's really hard to be able to draw lines or to be able to color code different material or when you're doing it on paper. So with speakers, I would also recommend you have multiple colors for your pens. So maybe you would have a 4-color pen or a 3-color pen like this, or you'd have multiple pens. So you'd be able to write certain material in black, certain material in red, and certain material in blue, depending on whether it's substantive material or if it's a refutation, things like this. So paper preparation and being able to write on paper is a really important skill that whip speakers definitely need to learn. So that's basically it. Why should you learn whip speech? Because it's really dynamic and really fun and difficult to do. It's really difficult to do because the majority of a whip speech has to do with listening to the debate, and the majority of your speech will not be pre-written before the debate happens. And that actually is probably a bad idea to do as a whip speaker. The whip speaker is the most, I would say, impromptu and the most sort of adaptable speaker of the team, who is able to understand strategically what's going on in the debate, and that's why the whip speaker speech is also quite hard to do. But if you're a great whip speaker, you can really lift up your team and cause your team to win over other teams, especially since a lot of whip speakers don't know how to do weighing, and they don't do weighing. And so if you have the superpower of being able to do weighing and to really organize the debate, you're already going to be miles ahead of other debaters. So yeah, that's my long video on whip speakers. And I think I will make a short one on reply speakers, but there are so many things I could say about the whip speech. I could talk for an hour or 2 hours on this. But I think just for the sake of brevity, and so that this video doesn't, go on and on and on, I think I'll stop here. And yeah, I'm very glad that I was able to go through all 3 speaker roles. I would highly recommend you learn all 3. Because the best first speakers really know how to do second and third. And the best second speakers really know how to do first and third. And the best third speakers definitely know how to do first and second. Because you cannot maximize your understanding of a certain speaker role if you don't understand the other speaker roles as well, and how your contributions or how you can contribute to not only to your teammates, but how you can sort of understand what's going to happen in the first and second speech and strategically call out their mistakes, what they did incorrectly if you don't know how it's supposed to be done. Right? So if you know how all 3 speaker roles are supposed to be done, then it's so much easier to point out mistakes that were made by the other speakers. And this is why it's so important to learn all 3 roles and to be flexible between all 3. Right? But yeah, that's the video for today. I hope you're able to watch all 3, and see you later.